It's humming at me. Structures and arrays all over the place. XML data is real good with structures, and it's still humming at me. Can we do something about the hum, by the way? Please. Louder. Okay, I'll talk a little louder now. As for me, my name is Kurtis. If you want to ask me a question, Kurtis works real well. I own computerman.com. I've been developing web applications for about 8 years, all by myself. It's been fun, and I will wear the mic. Anyway, I've been developing in ColdFusion since, oh gosh, late 90s. Been working for myself since '99. Really nice having a boss that understands what's important to me in life. I used to teach at Boise State University, so if any of you ever go to ESPN, please go to ESPN. They have a link on there for ESPYs. Boise State's nominated for 2 ESPYs this year. We'd appreciate your vote, unless you're from Oklahoma, in which case please don't throw anything at me. I just deployed my first Flex application, and I was thinking when I was writing the Flex application, well, what good is ColdFusion going to be for a while? Well, ColdFusion is going to still be very prevalent in the back end, and structures and arrays are very useful in the back end of your data manipulation. So structures and arrays will still play a very vital role in ColdFusion development. Don't ask me how ColdFusion works. I don't know. I don't want to know. I really don't care. All I know is it does work, and I can make it do what I want it to do. So what we're going to talk about, we'll talk about structures, obviously, arrays. Got to have that. We're going to show you how to write to a structure, how to write to an array, how to read from a structure, how to read from an array. We'll create a multidimensional array. We'll write to it. We'll read from it. And then inside a multidimensional array, we will create another multidimensional array. So we'll have an array of arrays, if you've heard that lingo around. And then inside that second multidimensional array, we will put in a structure. So we will have an array of an arrays that contains a structure at the end of this. And it's really not as hard as it sounds. It sounds it's a whole lot harder to say it than it is to do that. I like to call them complex containers just because it's great when you're going to the client sides, Well, I can put that into a complex container and loop through it, and their eyes glaze over, but it sounds cool, so I like doing that. I'll also show you a few practical uses for structures and arrays. Some are simple examples, some are not really useful, but we'll show a little bit of those. Okay, so what is a structure? A structure is nothing more than a key-value pair. You can think of it almost like a one-field table or two-field database table. You have a primary key field and you have a value field. And that's all a structure is, a key and a value. And like a database table, the key cannot be duplicated, single key. So in this case, we got a structure called arrow struct, and you'll find a pattern here real soon. If you're a 70s or 80s rocker, you'll understand this. Anyway, I created this arrow struct thing, and I put in a key. In my first one, I have a key named Tom, and the value is Hamilton. So anytime I reference my structure and I pass it in the key in as Tom, I will get Hamilton out. Well, how do I do this? It's really pretty simple. First thing I do is I create my structure. Now, ColdFusion does not require you to create a structure. You do not have to use cfset to create a structure. Do it anyway. It will save grief along the way. If you don't do it, you might end up with a real quirky bug that is exceedingly hard to find. So as a habit, create your structure. And something you're going to hear me harp on time and time again is give your structures and all variables useful names. In this case, I got arrow struct. When I see it, I know it is a structure containing something to do with arrow, whoever or whatever they are. Then I populate my structure, cfset. Cfset, name of the structure, the key, in this case, Tom. I have to delineate Tom with tick marks because it's alphanumeric text. Always delineate alphanumeric text with tick marks. Integers and variables do not get delineated. And then in the value, I have Hamilton. So I have Tom Hamilton, bassist if you're into Aerosmith. That's it. That's pretty simple. That's how you populate a structure. CF set, pass in the key, pass in the value, you just created a structure. Now, if you want to loop through the structure, you can do that too. Generally, I don't loop through structures for presentation, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute, but in this case, I'm going to. I'm just going to loop through my collection. My collection happens to be ArrowStruct. My item is my name, and then I'm going to output it, just CF output. CF output, my name dash ArrowStruct, and the value of that. And you can see what that looks like. And to show you I'm not really kidding, it works. Come on. This is the exact same thing. I create my structure, ArrowStruct. I populate my structure right here, pass in the Tom inside my tick marks. Then I loop through my collection. My collection is ArrowStruct. My item is name. I output my name. In this case, the key. Key is Tom. Key is Tom. So that kind of worked out real well. And the value in the structure for the key of Tom is Hamilton, and sure enough, it is Hamilton up there. That's it. Pretty simple, pretty basic. You pass in the name of the structure, or you pass in the name of the key to the structure, and it passes you whatever that structure value contains. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is right, exactly. Right here is my, oops, wrong place. Right here is my structure, and here is how I pass my key into it. Oh, I love Microsoft sometimes. So bracket my name is the key that's getting passed into the structure arrow_struct. If I wanted to, I could pass in this tick dash or tick Tom tick. I could put that right here, and it would also return Hamilton. In this case, I'm just passing in a dynamic variable. By the way, seeing how I am passing in a variable as my name, and that's part of the CF loop, by the way. CF loop goes through and gets me my key. Item is another word for key in ColdFusionville. But because I am passing in a variable, notice I don't have any tick marks around my name. If I did put tick marks around it, it would go into my structure and it would look for a key, my name, and it's not going to find it. We okay with that? Yes? No? More chocolate cake, a little more caffeine? Where's that C light bulb that we can, C fusion light bulb we could use? Let's see. Okay. Here's a real simple use for a structure. I use this from time to time. I use it more often when I'm using months of year. There's quite often times I'll create a form that has a drop-down list for months of year and another drop-down list for year itself, so I can select December 2006, and I can pass in those two variables to a report and generate a report off month, year. But in this case, we're just going to pass in days of the week. I got a new structure, day of week. Hey, it should be day of week struct, but that's okay. And day of week 1 happens to equal Sunday. Notice there are no tick marks around the 1. I could put tick marks around there, but because it's an integer, I chose not to. And this is how I set it. I just set my structure up. Day of week 1, Sunday, day of week 2, Monday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I use it, this is how I will use it. I will CF output. Date part of today is date part W will return a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, I believe, of today. And then I will output that to my structure. Well, let's just go and look at it. I'll put that out into my structure here. I'll set my structure up just like I showed you in the slide. I'll output today of today's date part is this right here, date part W now, and that returns a 6. So today is a Friday. I pass my key of 6 into my day of week structure right here. Here's my day of week structure. Notice it's in a, oh, I forgot my pound signs. I'm sorry. This should have a pound sign here, by the way. But I pass in my day of, or my day of the week into this structure day of week, and it's the exact same thing as this, date part W now, and it returns Friday. Because I passed in a 6, it returns in Friday. Okay? Just passing in a variable to a structure, and like I said, up here on my output statements, I should have a pound sign right here before the D, and right here after my angle bracket. My bad, I should have had those 2 pound signs. That does need to be encapsulated in pound signs. And the exact same thing here. I should have a pound sign before my date format and after my end parent. The only reason I put this part here, this date format thing, is because ColdFusion says you can go and get date part DDDD. It's full structure, but it is a structure, and it shows you how to use it. Okay? So far, so good? Just a simple example of how to use it. If it was months of year, I would have had date part M, and that would have returned a January for me if I was using months. Here's a real-world example of where I actually did use a structure to pass variables back and forth. It's from a real-world licensing application I wrote for the Real Estate Commission in Idaho. This is just a small subset of it. I have 4 drop-down controls. A person selects some fees. I'm obviously only showing some of the controls on my example here. Then I pass all that stuff onto another query, and it processes them, and then it puts things into a structure for display purposes. To show you what it looks like, I will do this. Come here. Here are my 4 drop-down lists. This is just, like I said, a small subset of the application. When a database or a designated broker has a licensing fee, he has to go and get some sort of license. I'll give him an ASR license. I don't know how much it costs. I don't care. It's stored in the database table. The broker was a little late paying his fee, so I'm going to give him a late fee. His company, he's going to be BOCO or BICU or whatever, and he bounced a check, the company did, so I'm going to select 4 different things. I'm going to pass them on to my processing page. So when I pass them onto my processing page, all it does is it tells me what my licensing fee was. And I'll show you how to do this in just a second. My penalty fee, my company license fee, and my company penalty fee. Now, yeah, I can do this with 4 queries, can't I? Well, sure, you sure can. You can do it with 4 queries. I would prefer to do it with 1 query and store the results into a structure and display the results of that structure. And here's how I do that. I go out and on my processing page, on this page here, I run a query. You see that query? Is that big enough? Okay. I run a query where my transaction code, the values I pass in here, happen to be the exact same values that I selected in those drop-down lists. The first one was ASR. Remember, the second one was late because the guy didn't pay his fee on time. The BOCO company because, well, they got BOCO money, I guess, and the NSF check because they bounced the check. So I just pass those variables into my query, and I return my records. So here's my records, or here's my query, and I return that record set. And that's just what this is from here to here. It's just that query. And this is what it looks like actually in code. Then I create a new structure, fee struct. Oh, hey, good name. What is a fee struct? Well, it contains fees. Okay, that works for me. Then I output my get fee query, and I put it into my fee struct. So I loop through my get fee query, and I put it into fee struct. Fee struct transaction code, whatever transaction code I passed in. In the first example, it was ASR. I put in ASR, where's my mouse, into ASR here, and whatever that amount is as returned by the query. I don't care what that amount is. That amount's stored into a database table, so if it ever changes, it's automatically updated, and I don't have to worry about it as a programmer. I just throw it in here, and it's good for me. So I populated my query, or my structure with the query. And then I output this on the processing page, and how I outputted it was just with DB license fee equals, and I forgot my pound signs in front of my dollars again. Gosh, I thought I checked for all that stuff. Anyway, I'm dollar formatting whatever I'm returning, and I'm going to go through my fee structure. I'm passing in the key. So I'm passing in the key of ASR on this first line, and it is returning $160. That's it. And on the last one, you know, the NSF check, right here, this would, if I looked at what form.co penalty code is, that would say NSF. So really, this is dollar format fee struct bracket tick NSF tick bracket, etc. And it returns whatever the current insufficient charges are for the check, NSF. Okay? And if you don't believe me, we can actually come way down here and look at the form fields, and here's my penalty code of NSF check. All right? Real-world example of how you can use a structure for outputting display. Shoot. Well, you would have had to run 4 queries in that case, or you would have had to know which one you were returning. So how are you going to know which record to return from your query? Because you had 4 records in that query result. So there were 4 records returned. So which record are you going to display? First one, second one, third one, fourth one? Or you could go in sequence, I suppose. You know, there's lots of ways to do things. This is just the way I chose to implement it. I like to use a structure for lookup values. I'm big on lookup values going into structure. And really, that's what this is. This is a lookup value for my ASR. A lookup value for ASR is 160 bucks. I'm just displaying it that way. In fact, that's really what I use structures for more than anything else, is just lookup values. And I'll talk some more about that in just a few minutes. Any other questions? Okay, dang it. I like questions. Questions keep me awake, too. Yeah. Preferences with structures. I, generally speaking, do not loop through a structure for data presentation, because when you put data into a structure, first in does not mean first out. First in doesn't mean last out. First in could come out in the exact middle. There is no sort order available for a structure. It's just whatever order it wants to come out in. So I don't like to loop in that, because I like to control, when I'm displaying data to my end users, I like to control the order of things. Structures are not ordered. They're great for lookup values. NSF space check equal $15. Okay, I like that for that. And once again, name your structure something that makes sense. When I'm looking through my code and I'm doing all my data manipulation up top, I'm separating my data manipulation from my data presentation. When I get down to my data presentation and I see this struct, well, what does this struct mean? What's that struct? No, it's this struct. Well, what's that struct then? I don't know. But I do know what fee struct is. I can look at the word fee and realize it's a fee, and I can look at the word struct and, oh, it's a structure containing fees. So be very, well, specific with naming variables. Those are just my preferences. They've worked for me for many years, so I still use them. Okay, we okay with structures, or are there any other questions on a structure at all? I mean, structure is just key value pair. That's all you have to remember. Anytime you hear somebody say key value, you pass in the key to the structure and it will return the value. That's all it means. Okay? One-dimensional array is sort of like a structure, except the key is an auto-incrementing integer. Well, maybe not auto-incrementing, but it should be an incrementing integer. The key of a one-dimensional array is always a counter for me, 1 through whatever. You can create arrays where you skip a row, but you're going to have problems. Never skip rows, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, too. But anyway, think of a one-dimensional array as just a list referenced by sequential numbers. If I ask you what's in row 3, what would you say? And what's his last name? Oh, somebody likes Aerosmith. Cool. I'm not the only one. That's good. That's good. Okay, so how do I write to this? This isn't any different than really writing to an array, or to a structure. First thing first, CF set, give yourself a name. I should have called it arrow array, but that was a little too tough for me to say. Say arrow array too many times and your tongue falls off, so I just called it Aerosmith. And it's array new. Now, notice when you created a structure, you didn't have any values in the parend. When you created an array, you got to tell if it's a single or a multi-dimensional array. In this case, it's a one-dimensional array, so I tell ColdFusion, hey, make me an array called Aerosmith, make it one-dimensional. Now I will populate the array. I have to tell the array what row I am putting things in. First row is 1, it equals Tom. Second row is 2, it equals Joe, et cetera, et cetera. Sequential referencing of rows is critical. I can go CF set Aerosmith 7 equals foobar, but that is foobar because once I start looping through my array, when I get past 5, I get an error. So now I either have to write error trapping code or my code blows up in my user's face. Always keep your rows sequential. Don't have to, but boy, you sure don't want to write all that error trapping code to go with it. Because if you're spending more time writing error-trapping code than you are actual code, you're really doing something wrong in your code. That's one of those IMHO things, I think. Okay, so after we populate the array, I guess we might want to look at how the array, how it looks. You can always use cfdump, but we're going to cf output this. We're going to loop through it. We're going to loop from 1. That's the beginning point. I could have started at 2. I could have started at 5 if I wanted to. 2, the array length of Arrowsmith. How long is Arrowsmith? Well, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't care how many rows are in the Arrowsmith array, because array length takes care of that for me. And then my index, XX, just happens to be a counter. So it counts for me, and it knows how many rows are in there for me, so I don't have to think about any of that. And then I just output it. I output Arrowsmith, whatever row number I'm on, and whatever the value of that is. And hopefully it still works, but I'm pretty sure it will. These are not complicated examples, so they will not blow up. Anyway, I create up here, I create Arrowsmith array again, one-dimensional. I populate it, and then I loop from 1 to the length of Arrowsmith. My index is XX, and I am displaying my XX right here, Arrowsmith, whatever current row number is, and then over here, that's the value of it. So I'm starting at 1, I'm going to the end, and I'm displaying the contents. That's it, nothing more, nothing less. Pretty simple still? Okay. We can make it a little more complicated. Oh, after we talk about the differences, I guess I ought to do that. Biggest difference is, to me, is you count with an array, you name with a structure. Count an array because you have sequential lines, but you name things with a structure. I named Tom to equal Hamilton. My array, row 1, equals Tom. Name structures count with arrays. For output, I always prefer an array unless it's just a lookup value. But if I'm going to loop through something, I will always loop through an array over a structure because I know what order things are inside the array. I do not know what the order is inside a structure. To me, those are the two biggest differences between the structure and the single-dimensional array. Actually, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever used a one-dimensional array. If I have a 1D array, I'm going to use a structure. But you have to understand the 1D array before you get to the 2D array, because the 2D array is really a one-dimensional array with just more than one column. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Somehow or another. No, it doesn't. No, if you start at 0, you got a problem. There is no such thing as a row 0. Now, if ColdFusion was started on Unix, there might have been a row 0, but it was started, I think, in the Windows world, so it starts at 1. Now, why they don't all start at 1, I don't know. I've never understood that about Unix. Let's start counting at 0. Okay, two-dimensional array. This is kind of like a spreadsheet. The only difference between this and a spreadsheet is our columns are named integers, not A, B, C, D. So when you look at this, this is just a spreadsheet. Once again, we have a row, and now we have to name our columns too. So when we start putting things in here, we have to know where they go. So I'm going to create my array, cfset Arrowsmith, same array name, equals array new, but this time I'm passing in a 2 to tell me it is a two-dimensional array. So now I got to populate the array. If on this first line, if I would have just gone cfset Arrowsmith 1 equals Tom, it would have blown up because I have to reference the row and I have to reference the column. I am now referencing an individual cell, or in Excel, cell 1A equals Tom. In an array, cell 1, 1 equals Tom. In Excel, cell 1B equals Hamilton. In an array, cell 1, 2 equals Hamilton. Same concept, just a little different nomenclature. Important thing, notice the referencing of the array name. You go by row and column. So once I put that data in, how do I get it out? Well, I do it the exact same way as I did it with the one-dimensional array. I loop through the array. Once again, I don't care how many rows it has. I do care, though, and I always care how many columns I have. And I'll get into columns here pretty heavy, I think, just because it's very important to me. When I'm looping through the array, I want to know what row I'm on, but I also know I have to know what column I'm working with. So when I put my output here, notice I got my row here. I don't care what the row is, but I do care what the column is. And to show you what that looks like over in the real world, Exact same thing. I populate my array. I just add a little more things. Oh, by the way, if you are an Aerosmith fan, I did go and Google these guys, and those are their actual birth dates. So I feel a little younger than I used to before I did this, because I thought they were old when I was young, man. I guess I was wrong. Anyway, I'm looping through my array now from 1 to whatever the length is of that array, and I have my index do my counting for me, and then I output it. I am outputting Aerosmith, whatever row I am on, and then I output whatever the contents of that cell is. In this case, row whatever. The counter over here in my loop takes care of that for me. Cell 1. I do care about that. And over here, row 1, cell 1 is Tom. Row 1, cell 2 is Hamilton. Row 1, cell 3 is his birth date. One thing about column, is that a good time to talk about it here? I'll talk about it in just a sec. Are we okay with this? Do you understand row, column? You just have to know exactly what cell you're working with. Okay? There's a couple of practices about two-dimensional arrays that I am a big stickler on when I'm writing code. Sort of like a database table, each column in my world contains like data. I will not mix numeric and alphanumeric and date data in the same column. If I have dates in cell 3, every row, I don't care what row I'm on, but every column 3 will have date data in it. And the reason I do that is on the output over here. If you notice, when I output cell 3 here, once again, I don't care what row I'm on. I'm in cell 3, but I encapsulate that particular cell with date format. What happens if I have just the word is in that cell? Date format throws an error, application blows up, your end user thinks you don't have a clue. So when you build your cells, or when you build your arrays, columns are very much like database columns. They should always contain the exact same type of data. Cell 3 in this array will always contain a date, or it will contain nothing. Not a null, it will contain an empty field. And that's the second thing I want to talk about. Oh, by the way, same thing can arise if you mix alphanumeric and integer text together. Don't do that. Because if for some reason you're referencing something as an integer and you put the letter A in there, it will blow up because you forgot to put your tick marks around it on your output. So remember, always keep your columns the same data type. Know the number of columns in your array. You want to know what's in cell 1. Cell 1 is always first name. You want to know what's in cell 2. Cell 2 is always last name. You want to know what's in cell 3, date of birth. Output is a whole lot easier if you know what's in your columns. If you make a dynamic columns, good luck. I've never had luck making dynamic columns. Never. Know your data type in each column. I can't emphasize that enough. Couldn't care less about the number of rows. I don't care. Unless I'm building a table and there's 1,000 and HTML is real slow on building a 1,000-row table. Then I might care, but other than that, I don't really care. I do care what the name is. I will always care about what the name is. Well, that's called that array. No, I thought it was this struct. No, if it was this struct, that array. Well, wait a second. Who's on first again? I don't know. I do know what arrow struct is, and I should have called this arrow array, but like I said, that's a hard thing for me to think about. And the other thing is always touch every cell of your array when you're building it. There are 3 kinds of things that you can output you cannot see. You don't see a null, you don't see an empty field, and you don't see a space. But all 3 are completely distinct and separate entities. A null is nothing. A null is not defined. An empty field is defined, but it's defined as nothing, which is still better than being not defined at all. And a space is, well, it's a white space. White space on white text or white background, it's invisible. 3 separate things, know what's in there, but you have to touch every single cell, because if I start looping through this and I didn't set anything into the cell 6.1, if I would not have set anything into cell 6.1 but had something in cell 6.2, when I loop through it and I touch cell 6.1 for output, it would blow up because it's not defined. You always want to define every cell in your array. You want to touch it. Even if it's nothing, if you're going to put in nothing, that's better than not defined. Remember those 3 things. Null, empty, space. Once you start putting things in there and change null to empty fields, a lot of your bugs go away. awful lot of your bugs go away. Can't tell you the number of times that has bit me. Well, what's wrong with that? It just blew up on me. Well, how come? Well, there wasn't anything in there. All right, we okay with 2D arrays? Okay, we're on to 30 minutes, and we're going to talk about this thing here. I'm not really going to go into this schema other than to say we are going to pull data out of this schema. We're going to pull data from this schema and put it into an array. And then we're going to take that array and pull data out of another portion of this schema and put it into an array within the array. And then we're going to run a third query and pull data out of this schema and put it into the array that contains an array into a structure inside that container. So that's all I'm going to say about that, other than we will use the table users, report params, and report names quite a bit. Okay, first thing first, let's go get some data. I'm going to run this query get report. That's a pretty good name. I'm thinking when I look at the name get report, I'm probably touching the report names table without reading the rest of my code. And sure enough, I'm selecting some garbage from report names table. And I'm passing in some where criteria. Okay, so I just ran a query. No biggie, we do it all the time. What am I going to do with that? Well, I'm going to take that result set, that record set, and I'm going to put it into a multi-dimensional array. I'm going to create an array called report array. Hey, what do you think is going to be in report array? Reports? Okay, just making sure. I'm going to set a counter. I really like when I'm having to manipulate my counters myself, I'm going to use the variable myCount. And anytime you create a counter, I would recommend always using the same thing. If I'm looping through something, I use XX or CC. If I'm controlling the count, I like to use myCount, personal preference. Then I'm going to output through the query get report. And as I go through there, all I'm doing is populating some stuff into various cells of the array. In this case, I have 6 cells into my array, and after I populate the 6th cell, and we'll talk about this purple one here in a second, after I populate this guy here, I increment my counter by 1. Why would I want to increment my counter? Takers? Anybody? Yeah, so I'm at the right row in my record set. If I don't increment my counter the second time through here, if my count is still set to 1, I just overwrote whatever was in cell 1, 1. I want this second record to be in cell 2, 1. So I increment my counter. And to talk about that a little bit more, when I'm creating my array, notice in cell 6 I had that command cfset report array, whatever row I'm on, I don't care what row I'm on, cell 6 equals array new, and it is a multi-dimensional array. So I just created a new array, and the name of that new array is report array, whatever row I'm on, cell 6. That is the new name of my second multi-dimensional array. The way I look at it, it's just another multi-dimensional array. It just has a weird name. That's all. Okay with that? And I'll show you what it looks like in the output here in a second, and it'll make a whole lot more sense. I think, should I look at that now? Yeah, I think I should. Let's come up here and take a look at example 6. Here I am. I ran through my report array. All I'm doing is dumping the contents, by the way, cfdump, and that's all this green stuff. If you haven't used cfdump, use it. You will like it unless you have a whole lot of records. If you have less than 100 records, cfdump is great. And that's what this green thing is, cfdump report array. In other words, after I wrote my array, I'm dumping it out here. And I put some things up here so you know what is in each cell. This is just for display purposes, for explanation. In cell 1, I have whatever, get yearly. Oh, that's the wrong, that should say get report. Anyway, I have a primary key called report name count. That is what that value right here is. That is report name count. Cell 2 happens to be a report name, and this is just some template that I built in ColdFusion that I'm going to be passing data into in a few minutes. Cell 3, every time I run this particular report that's highlighted, I'm going to email it to somebody, and this is what I'm going to put in the email body. This is just my text that's going to be in the body. Cell 4 is who's the person selling it, or sending it. Cell 5 happens to be the subject that's going to go on the subject line of every single report that I mail out to every single user. And cell 6 is an empty multi-dimensional array. Okay? CFDump really does a good job of showing that I have just created a multi-dimensional array right here inside of an existing array. We okay with that? Okay, report array, create the new array, increment my counter, and then I output query get report. By the way, if get report returns something like a report name that is not, that's null, because I still use this command cfset, even if this guy right here is null, the array is set to empty field. I still touched that, so it is no longer a null. I have put an empty field into my array, even though the query returned nothing. Okay, remember, nulls, empties, spaces. I touched it, so I put in an empty space. That's really important, by the way. I can't emphasize that enough. You'll get some weird problems if you don't touch every cell of your array. You just get some weird problems. Okay, so now that we have some content into report array, and the content we have in here is right here. This is my report array content. I'm going to run my second query, and I'm going to run my second query based on the contents of my first query. So if I have 5 rows in the first query, I'm going to run my second query 5 different times. Every time I run it, I am going to take the data from that second query and throw it into my second multidimensional array. Basically, I'm doing the same thing I just did inside of the array. That make sense? I'm running a query, I'm putting the contents into an array. That's what we did when we made the first array. That's what we're doing to the second array. We will write, like I said, run it every time for every row in the array. So if the first query returned 5 records, we will run this second query 5 times. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I want to do that. Okay, so as we loop through this, we're going to dynamically build our next query. There's many ways to do this, by the way. Many different ways. This is the method I chose. I don't know why, I just did. Anyway, we've seen this before, CF loop from 1 to array length report array, and I got a counter of CC. Got tired of XX, so I went to CC. Don't know why, just did. The next thing I'm doing is I'm setting my report name count to the first cell of the whatever current row I am on. I do this because I'm going to use this variable 30 lines down or so in my code. And when I'm going through my code for debug, to me, the word my report name count means something to me, whereas report array row whatever cell 1 means absolutely nothing to me. Because if I see that in my code 3 months after I wrote this, I have to go and find, well, what's that value again? If I see my report name count, well, report name count happens to be a primary key. My is just my variable for that primary key. And you'll see this a couple of more times. But anyway, I create a query. I call it get users, and I select stuff, in this case a report user and an email address, from a couple of tables where report name count is really equal to report array whatever row I'm on, cell 1. Okay, so I just ran another query that's dynamically built. And in this case, like I said, I'll run this one 5 times or so. CFset command is optional, but like I said a few minutes ago, I'm a big fan of variables making sense. Like I said, my report name count means a heck of a lot more to me than report array CC1. What is that? I have no idea. Every time I loop through this, remember my report name count will change. And then every time we run this query, we're going to add this data to the second multidimensional array. Well, how do we do that? If there are query records returned, we will do something. If not, obviously, we don't do anything at all. So I have to put in my if statement, my error trapping. If there are records, let's go and put some stuff into that second multidimensional array. And do you remember what the array name is of the second multidimensional array? Report array, whatever line I'm on, cell 6 is the name of my second multidimensional array. So this stuff from right here, report array CC6, that is the name of my array. I am working on row, where's my mouse again? Row new count, because I had to have a new counter, I set it up here to 1, cell 1. So I got my report arrays, whatever row number, cell 6, whatever row I am on in my second multidimensional array, cell 1 is going to equal report user count, which happens to be a primary key of a user. Cell 2 is a new structure. Cell 3 is the user's email address. I told you I was going to send some emails out when you looked at that structure, so I got to find out who to send these to. We okay with that? The structure that I just created is named report array, I don't care what row, cell 6, I don't care what row, cell 2. That is the name of the structure we just created. It's no different than arrow struct, it just has a longer name. It's the exact same thing. We just created a structure, a key-value pair. In this case, arrow struct has been replaced with report array, whatever row we're working on, cell 6, whatever row we're working on, cell 2. Whatever row we're working on is taken care of by CC for me in new count, so I don't have to think about those. I let the system worry about what rows I'm on. But that's all we did. We just created a new structure with a funky name. And that's what I say right here. Report structure name is report array, whatever row, cell 6, whatever row, cell 2. And that's what we did. It's the exact same CFSet command. Exact same CFSet command. By the way, we reset new count to 1 every time that we loop through the get user's record, because inside the second multidimensional array, we always want to start at row 1, not row 2, not row 3. In the second MD array, we always start at row 1. And remember, the second multidimensional array is named report array whatever row cell 6. But we still have to start at row 1. And then all we did is, as we loop through our query here, we just throw it into the array, into the second multidimensional array. Okay? It'll make sense when we start looking at pictures of it, I promise. Okay, now we have to populate the contents of the structure. Well, as we're looping through our second query, we happen to get some parameters out there, and one of those parameters was report user count. So we're going to run our third query, and we're going to pull in some parameters that are specific for this individual person. So we're going to create a new query called getParams. That's how I knew I was going after parameters. GetParams means something. And we're going to select stuff from a couple of tables, where report name count equals my report name count. Now, this is 30 or 40 lines lower than when I first set my report name count. So if you're looking at this 2 weeks later, which would you rather see? Where a variable equals my report name count, or where a variable equals array, what is it, report array CC1. And it's like, ugh. I like having variables that make sense. It makes it so much easier for debug later on. This I understand. And report user count equals whatever the current value is in the get users row as we loop through our queries. So we wrote our query. We get some records from it. Or if we get some records from it. Actually, I think I do have a CFIF in my actual code, but I didn't show it here. But as we loop through our query getParams, we start putting values into our structure. We populate our key value structure now. And our key happens to be getParams.paramName. That is our key. GetParams.userParam value is our value. Our key value pair, and don't forget the name of the structure is report array whatever row cell 6, whatever row cell 2. Okay? And that's all we do. That's how we populate it. It's no different than populating the structure the first time. It's no different than populating the multidimensional array for the first time. It's just you're inside a loop as you do it. So don't get too caught up in, oh my gosh, I'm 5 layers into 4 loops, and who cares? New count is taking care of counting for me, and CC is taking care of counting for me, so all I got to remember are my names. My structure name and my second dimensional array name. Report array CC cell 6 is my array name. My structure name is report array CC 6, whatever line cell 2. We just got different names is all. It's the exact same thing. And then after that, we close our loops, we increment our counters, and yada, 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 yada. And what it looks like is this. All I'm doing is the same exact thing, cfdump report array. Remember, it's a little bit bigger of an array now. And once again, I have what is in each content, just so when you look at it, you can see what's there. Cell row 1, cell 1 happens to have that report name count. We've gone through all those before. Cell 6 happens to be that new multidimensional array, and sure enough, now in cell 6, we have a new multidimensional array. And inside that array, we have 3 fields, 3 columns. Column 1 is a value. In this case, it happens to be the primary key of the person getting the report. Row 2 is a structure, containing parameters. How many parameters? I don't care. I just know that I have certain parameters in there that are going to get passed to a report. So actually, I do care when I wrote the report, but right now I don't care because it's an automated process. And then I also have a email address for that person, and it is stored into an array. The whole point of this is now that I got all this data here, I can run this report here as many times as I need to. In this case, I'm going to run auto day report. I'm going to run it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I'm going to run the exact same report 4 times, but each time I run it, I'm going to pass in different parameters. First person, Mad Dog, is going to get it where agency count equals 2. Exact same report's getting ran the second time for ABC, and he's going to get where agency count equals 7. So I've created a method of running the same report many times, passing in customized parameters so everybody gets their own individualized report, and it runs at night every night so I don't have to touch it ever again. That's why it's cool. Otherwise, I had the whole reason this came across or came to being is somebody was busy generating reports. She would spend 4 hours every day generating reports and mailing them out because she'd have to go in and customize every report, generate it, send it. Next report, customize parameters, generate it, send it. This does it in a matter of minutes. Saved her much, much time. But that's what the structure looks like now. I have an array, I should say, not a structure, my complex container. I have an array that contains 6 fields. Remember that very first time we looked at this array? That's what it looked like. We have an array that has 6 fields. And now inside this, we have an array that has 3 fields. 1, 2, 3. And in that second field, we have a structure. That's it. It's not, that's what an array of an array is. If you hear people say, oh, it's just an associative array, well, that's this. Well, it's a structure of arrays. Well, that's this. What's an array of structures? Well, that's this. It's just a container that has a weird name to get to the data. That's all it is. So when they say that, don't get all frozen up. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a name. Nothing more, nothing less. And this is pretty much the exact same stuff that I showed in the on the top of the output. It's just what's contained in every cell of the structure or a container. So now that I have all that data into this container, what do I do with it? Well, I need to loop through it so I can generate my reports, and then I can mail those reports out. And that's how you loop through this complex container, and this is how you loop through any array of arrays. You got to start at your biggest container. In this case, we are going to start looping through. Let's see, I'll close all that. In this case, we're going to start looping through this array right here. The first loop has to be your outermost container. Okay, fine. CF loop from 1 to, I don't care how long it is. Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. My counter XX is going to take care of that for me. So I'm going to loop from 1 to its length. I am going to set report name equal to, and this right here is just a pathing to the report. It could be C:/ColdFusion /dub/dub/ whatever you want. Actually, your app/reports I usually set as a request variable in application.cfc so I can move it around from machine to machine and not worry about pathing too much. But anyway, I just have to tell it where the path is. So it's going to equal some path and report array, whatever row I'm on, cell 2. Okay, well, what is that? Report array, whatever row I am on, cell 2. So I'm just concatenating this to some other machine named path, C:/data/dub/dub/pubwork/execsum/autodayreport.cfm. Anyway, I can go and find that template and pass stuff into it. That's all that this CF set does. Now I am going to, once I'm inside my first loop, I am going to open up a second loop. I'm going to loop from 1 to array length of my second array. And remember, my second array is named report array, whatever row, I don't care, cell 6. Okay? Row 1, or row whatever, I don't really care, cell 6, or cell 6 is right here. So I'm going to start looping through this array now. And like I said, I don't care how long it is. This time I have to have a different counter, so I have YY. if I am going to do looping and looping and looping, I always increment my counters by one character. So I'd go XX, YY, ZZ. That way I know that I know where that counter is referencing, what loop it's referencing. If you want to make it a little easier, I guess you should start at AA. So AA is your first loop, BB is your second loop, CC is your third loop, etc. I don't know why I start with X, but old habit. Anyway, as I am looping through there, I come down here and I include this template, and it just pulls in some ColdFusion report that I generated a long time ago. And then I output it. And then I output it here. Now the thing to remember is when I do an include, whatever I include into my template, it knows all about that complex container. So as it's running through here, as I include this report the first time, it knows all about this stuff right here. It knows all of the parameters right here, and it knows who it's going to send that report to. You have to program that into your report, by the way. You can't just make it blind. Your report has to know what you're storing in your structure. But that's how it customizes that iteration of that report, because it has access to this complex container because I included the template into it. And then I just close my loops out. I do my loops. In this case, I will run this same report 4 times. Then I'll go and get the next report, and I will run it a few times. 14 times, so right now I've generated 18 reports, and then I will run this no times. So I've ran 18 reports. And that's how you loop through it. First loop returns a report name. The second, the CF set, just tells me what template I'm going to run. Second loop just loops through the second innermost array. Shoot. Because I wanted it to run on this particular web application, which is not much of an application. If I didn't, it was going to go and try and pull in a report that doesn't exist, and but that's how you would do it. If you had customized reports, that's how you would do it. You would, as you're looping through here, you'd want to call in that report and pass in this parameter stuff here. But because I don't have that report here, I commented it out. That's all. That's it. That's all these things are. And wow, I got done 7 minutes faster than I thought. Questions? Shoot. Absolutely. There are no rules as to how deep you can mix and match these stuff. There's no reason why you can't start a structure and put an array in there. You could have a structure, this struct, the key would be array, and inside the array you could have a multidimensional array. So the command would be cf set bracket tick this struct tick bracket equals array new 2. And then that would be a multidimensional array inside a structure. Mm-hmm. There's many ways of doing the same thing. Yeah, there's lots of ways of doing it. Actually, I wrote this when CF5 was out, so this is the code I used. But you know what? It has held up for 4 or 5 years, and like I said, it saved this person 4 hours a day, every single day of the week. So it's a useful thing. Appending? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, you can, well, that's what we do here quite often. We append to the first array 3 times. So we got 3 cells, so we just keep appending depending on how many records are returned from the query. Now, if you want to go and manually do it, you can append that too. You just got to follow the same notation. Report array, make sure you know what row you're on, and then fill in all your cell stuff. Anybody else? Wow, I got done 5 minutes early. Was I talking that fast? Well, thank you for coming. Please fill out your bubble sheets, and don't forget, ESPN.com, the ESPYs, man. Boise State, give them some love. They need it.